Hi, I'm Cruz, and today I will be talking about Joseph. If you listened last time, you'll know that he was sold by his brothers from hatred, and put in prison for no reason. But today we will finish Joseph's story. While Joseph was in prison, Pharaoh was in the palace. And while Pharaoh was in the palace, for some reason, we don't know why, he got mad with his cupbearer and baker, and he sent them to the same prison as Joseph was in. Well, one night, the cupbearer and the baker had dreams, and they were upset. So one day, while Joseph was walking through the prison, he saw the cupbearer and the baker's sad and upset-looking faces. Well, then he asked them what was the matter, and they told him that they had dreams. And Joseph said, "Tell me your dreams." And then, so the cupbearer went first. He said, "In my dream, I was holding Pharaoh's cup, and I looked, and I saw a tree, and it grew, and it had 3 branches, and it bloomed blossoms and then grapes. And so then I looked at my cup, and then at the grapes, and I walked over to this tree and squeezed the grape juice into the Pharaoh's cup. Then I walked back, and I gave the cup to the Pharaoh." Joseph smiled and said, "I'm glad to say that the 3 branches are 3 days." And smiling even larger, he said, "And in 3 days you will go back to the palace." And the cupbearer, a smile grew on the cupbearer's face. His eyes brightened, and so did his face. He beamed. But when the baker saw that, he said, "Well, in my dream, I was walking to the palace with 3 baskets on my head, and in each of the 3 baskets were fresh pastries. Pastries are like, I guess, bread. And so, but when I was walking back to the palace, birds came and started eating the pastries." And then Joseph's big smile turned upside down into a frown. That meant that he wasn't smiling anymore. He said, "Your dream means that the 3 baskets are 3 days, and in 3 days, the Pharaoh will put you to death." And the baker's face, well, it didn't look good. He wasn't smiling. He looked very, very sad and upset. Well, then, just like Joseph said, in 3 days, the cupbearer was taken out of prison back to the palace. I can just imagine how happy he was stepping out of the prison and walking through the palace doors. But, just like Joseph said, the baker was put to death in 3 days. Well, before the cupbearer had gone, Joseph asked him if he could please tell the Pharaoh about Joseph so that Joseph could get out of prison. But the cupbearer forgot because God knew that it wasn't time for Joseph to get out of prison. But then the Pharaoh had a dream. I bet you're thinking, "Wow, this is the 3rd time of dreams." And yes, dreams, and more dreams. Well, the Pharaoh told all of his wise men the dreams, but none of them could understand them. or tell the Pharaoh what the dreams meant. But then the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he told the Pharaoh, Your Majesty, I remember a man when we were in prison and you had been mad with us. There was a man in there, and he told us, and we had some dreams, me and the baker, and Joseph interpreted the dreams to us. Oh, and by the way, to interpret means to tell people the dreams. To figure it out. Well, anyway, the Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he came. And before he came into the palace, he shaved his head and dressed like an Egyptian, since he was going to be in the presence of Pharaoh. So he went and he kneeled before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, I've heard that you can interpret dreams. But Joseph said, I cannot interpret dreams. I bet you're amazed that Joseph would say that. He had a chance. Joseph said, but God can interpret the dreams. And your dreams mean that the 7 cows that came up out of the river are 7 years. And the 7 ugly cows that came out of the river are also 7 years. And the 7 good stems of corn are 7 years. And the other 7 not good looking stems of corn are also 7 years. They both mean the same thing. But the 7 good stems of corn and the 7 good cows, good looking cows, they are 7 years of plenty. But the 7 ugly cows and the 7 not good looking stems of corn are 7 years of famine. And then the Pharaoh asked Joseph, what do you think we can do to prepare for the famine? And Joseph said, I think that it would be wise to put a man in charge of some people and take 1/5 of the grain in the years of in the 7 years of plenty, and then store them up in storehouses, so the good years of plenty will not be forgotten in the 7 years of famine. Then the Pharaoh said, Can we find any other man with the Spirit of God like this who can interpret dreams? And then the Pharaoh said, You will now be called Zaphenath-Paneah, and you will be governor of the land. So Joseph was made governor of the land, and he rode in the 2nd chariot. Well, I bet you're going to be surprised when I'm going to tell you that Jacob and his sons and Canaan that I told you about last time, in their land of Canaan, that was one of the places where the 7 years of famine was going on. So Jacob sent down his 10 sons, the sons of Leah, but he kept Benjamin because Benjamin was the last son of his favorite wife Rachel. Well, the 10 brothers went down and they kneeled before Joseph, and Joseph said to a man who would interpret for Joseph, he said, the governor, Zaphenath-Paneah, thinks that you are spies. But the brothers said, We are not spies. We are all sons of one man. One of the sons is no more. They were talking about Joseph. And the other is with his father. And they were talking about Benjamin. Then Joseph still thought they were spies, or he was acting like he did. And he said, well, one of you, well, you will all stay in prison. And so all of the brothers stayed in prison for 3 days. But after that, they were brought out. But Simeon, one of the 10 brothers, was still left in prison. The other 9 brothers had to go back to Canaan without Simeon. They told their father that Joseph said that they couldn't come back to Egypt without Benjamin. But the brothers also had their money in their sacks. But then Jacob at first would not let them take Benjamin, because Benjamin was the only son left of Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife. But when they had actually ran out of food, so much that they would actually have to go back to Egypt, Jacob finally let them take Benjamin back to Egypt. Well, when they got back to Egypt, Joseph gave orders that Simeon would be let go. So all 11 brothers were at the table, and they were put in order from oldest to youngest. And Joseph gave them a special honor to have food sent down from his own table. And so when the food had gone down, Benjamin had the most of the food, probably 5 times more than the other brothers. After dinner, Joseph sent the brothers away with some money back in their sacks. But after they went away, Joseph, he sent his chariots after the brothers, and the man in charge of the chariot said, "Why have you repaid good with evil? One of you has stolen the governor's favorite silver cup." The brothers knew none of them had done it, and they said, "But sir, we didn't steal it." And the man said, "We'll find out sooner or later." So then the man searched their sacks, and he found the silver cup in Benjamin's sack. So the man took all the brothers back to Egypt to meet with Joseph. Back in Egypt, Joseph said that Benjamin would have to be his slave since Benjamin had the cup. But the brothers didn't want Benjamin to be his slave, because, as you know, Jacob didn't want Benjamin to have anything happen to Benjamin. When Joseph saw the brothers all wanting to take Benjamin's place as Joseph's slave instead of Benjamin, Joseph knew that their hearts had changed, because Joseph was doing all of this to see if his brothers' hearts had changed. Then Joseph began to cry, but he had sent all of his servants and the interpreter out of the room, and then he began to cry, and he told the brothers, "I am your brother Joseph." And the brothers stood as stiller than statues. They were just amazed that Zephaniah, governor of the land, was, crying and saying that he was their brother. I bet that they did not believe him. But then Joseph said, "It is not you who sent me to Egypt. God sent me. So do not be angry with yourselves, for God sent me. He has made me a father to Pharaoh. And now I am the ruler of Egypt. 2 years of famine have passed, and 5 more years of famine are yet to come." You see, 5 plus 2 is 7, and that makes the 7 years of famine, like Joseph had said. But then Joseph said, "Go back to my father Jacob and say, Joseph is alive in Egypt, and bring my father Jacob back down to Egypt, for we will have plenty in Egypt." And Joseph forgave his brothers, and he cried over his brothers. And so then Joseph sent his brothers back with wagons, and they told Jacob of how Joseph was alive in Egypt. And at first he didn't believe them, but then he did believe them. And so Jacob and the whole family came back down to Egypt. And Jacob came to see Joseph and was reunited with him. And I bet that Joseph was glad to see his father again. And that's how the Israelites came to Egypt. Came to live in Egypt, actually. Thanks for listening. This is Cruz signing off.